Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Battlecry, where we get you up close and personal with Indian weapons, Indian warfighters, and everything in between. On episode 2 of Battlecry this year, it's not very good news because India's biggest drone program may have just crash landed. Does India have a drone crisis? Not enough drones, none of them homegrown. India's biggest drone effort hits a wall. But big hopes from a new Indian drone. India has created fighters. But what ails India's drone efforts? The big focus on Battlecry this week. When it began 10 years ago, the Tapas was described by its makers and developers as India's predator. That was how confident they were that this drone would be very much like the legendary American Predator drones, full with the capacity to fly for long hours and also strike targets. Well, a decade later, the Tapas program, as it's called in India, is all but over. Here's our report.
They are indispensable over today's battlefields. Their ability to stay airborne for long durations while keeping an eye on the battlefield or any area of interest makes them more than just eyes in the sky. Drones are no longer a luxury item in any modern armed force. Amazingly, India, despite a legacy of aviation development, is not in a great place where drones are concerned. Not only does India not have enough advanced long-endurance drones to cover its vast areas of interest, but it doesn't operate a single advanced drone that's been developed in India. And now there's more troubling news. And it involves India's chief effort to develop the country's first long-endurance drone for the armed forces. The Tapas, a drone that has been in development and flight test for nearly 15 years now, has hit a roadblock, with reports emerging that the armed forces have shut their doors to the program. The reason? In extensive flight tests, the drone still has not managed to demonstrate an airborne endurance of over 24 hours at an altitude of 30,000 feet, falling short in both parameters. While reports of sudden disinterest by potential customers is troubling, experts believe that the writing was on the wall. The armed forces are said to have been unenthused by progress and unsatisfied with the drone's performance as a surveillance platform, despite the Tapas demonstrating several high-performance missions to prove its maturity. The Tapas drone project will continue to cruise, but with potential customers backing away, the fate of the program becomes a big question. And that's where a different Indian drone program flies into the picture. It's called the Archer NG, and it's still on the drawing board, with only brochure art and models emerging in the public domain. Sources reveal that the slightly smaller, single-engined Archer NG, modeled in some ways on the in-service Israeli Heron drone is the homegrown drone that will finally meet the armed forces requirements. Importantly, unlike the Tapas, the Archer NG is being developed from the ground ups as a weaponized drone, capable of firing precision munitions like the Predator Reaper family. When the Tapas program began, it had been trumpeted by its developers as being India's Predator, and in some ways more capable than the legendary American drone family. Ironically, things haven't gone that way, with the Tapas now reportedly being delinked from military requirements and India negotiating with the United States for 31 drones from the Predator family. Will Tapas rise from the dead in a new form, or will India now go full speed ahead on the Archer NG?
And to understand a little better why this advanced drone program, by far the most ambitious that India has as part of its entire indigenous drone efforts, has been in some ways foreclosed or delinked from the requirements of the Indian military. I'm joined now by someone we consider our favorite voice on all things aviation, Anant Singh. He's a very well-known and well-regarded aviation writer, researcher, scholar, photographer, analyst. Welcome, Anant. Also with us is Anant Krishnan M. He's a journalist who's spent a lot of time in Bengaluru reporting on the labs that are responsible for these projects, and he's actually the one who scooped perhaps this news about the Tapas program in some ways being foreclosed or maybe even delinked by the military. Anant, I'd like to start with you, since it was your tweet that kind of set the cat among the pigeons, because people were kind of taken aback, wondering why the Tapas program, and let me remind our viewers, when the Tapas program began, a little over a decade ago, it was touted as India's Predator, and, many such things were said about it. You're saying that right now the military doesn't want it anymore. Can you explain what happened, Anant?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Shiv. Yeah, it's more or less now confirmed that the Tapas program is being closed. In the sense, it is no more a mission mode program for DRDO, and so it has been now scaled down to a DRDO project. In the sense, they'll have to now fund with the DRDO funds, and then they'll have to prove whatever PSQ are set by the armed forces. As all of us know, primarily the armed forces, basically Army and Air Force, was looking at something like 30,000 feet and 24 hours of flying. That was one of the primary requirements, and it did not meet that. And I understand, from the armed forces that, overall, perhaps the armed forces were not happy with the bird. So that was something which is very evident. Yeah.
Okay. Angat, I'll come back to you, Anant. Angat, could it be that simple? I'll zoom out and we'll talk about the drone programs in general and, siloization, as you had put it, when you were talking about this story on social media earlier. I'll come to that in a moment. But specifically on this program, the Tapas being sort of delinked from military requirements, how do you read that? What are you hearing? Could it be as simple as the military saying, it doesn't reach a couple of, parameters and therefore we don't want it anymore? How are you reading this, Angat?
Not only do I think it could be that simple, for once, Shiv, I'm glad that it was that simple, and it certainly should be that simple, because this is the definition of a mission mode project, right? You pick the user and DRDO, the relevant laboratory decides what is the sort of low-hanging technological fruit. They declare a mission mode project, and it is declared a mission mode project because they believe it can be done quickly and relatively easily, and it can be fielded on a strict timeline. So when a mission mode project like this is closed because it hasn't met its requirements, I think that's a good sign for how we manage projects, defense research projects in this country. It's not something that happens very often before, so I see that as a good thing and nothing more.
Can you add a little bit, Angad, on what you think may have happened? We're talking about altitude, we're talking about endurance, parameters. We've seen a lot of opinion, obviously, focused on social media. This will be the first time on television that we're talking about this story openly. What do you think may have actually happened? Is it, is this something that has taken its time and finally reached this conclusion? Was the military already sort of unenthused by this program for a while now?
I think the writing was definitely on the wall. It's for two reasons. I mean, and this is less opinion, more fact. One is that the airframe was always overweight, has always been overweight. And as a consequence of that, flow things like altitude and endurance and so on. There have been other issues which I'm not sure how many of them were resolved satisfactorily, like data linking. There were issues with beyond line of sight data linking, and they did some SATCOM demonstrations recently. But I think fundamentally the project has been on life support for a while. And it had sort of gone to that sort of death spiral where certain issues were too intractable to resolve. And an 18-hour sort of 30,000 foot drone is not much better, or is not at all better than what the military already uses.
Yes.
So underwriting a lower capability essentially is not a smart way to spend taxpayer money. So I think that was a good call.
Okay, so a good call to de-link and take a hard decision. Many people have questioned this decision, blaming the military for not supporting an indigenous program. Angad says if it's a mission mode project, if it doesn't meet requirements, take a clear call, and that's what the military has taken in this instance. With the Tapas, now becoming a DRDO project, Anant, the Archer program, images of which we've seen doing the rounds for a couple of years now, has come out. It looks very much like the Heron. The architecture seems like the Heron drone, but this is an indigenous program, significantly different, slightly smaller, single engine, weaponized, as you've been reporting, and several other reporters have then added on to that. What are you hearing about that? Because is that going to be now the prime focus as far as the military is concerned? Anant.
Yeah, absolutely. So, now with this is the other program going to the DRDO hangars, and, they'll have to now get back with the requirements, all that. The focus now shifts to Archer NG, and of course, it comes with a lot of features. It's an improved program. It's an armed UAV. It can carry 300 kilograms of ammunition, bombs, air-to-air missiles, anti-tank missiles. And surface-to-air missiles, including the SAW. So, and as you know, Shiv, this when you talk about Archer and these kind of UAVs, we are not getting into a war scenario on a daily basis. So the focus here has to be more than the weapon capability, the surveillance. So this particular machine can be used for 24/7 kind of surveillance, intelligence collection, all that, and plus what I understood from talking to various scientists, it can fly well in the Himalayan regions, in the plains.
But Anant, is there a timeline? Is there a timeline on the Archer NG, or is it still on the drawing board?
No, it is going to fly in the first quarter of in the next 3 months. It is going to fly, and in fact, I spoke to a couple of people even in the armed forces, and they are saying that it's a weapon system, right? We only talk always about the flying machine, but there are other systems on the ground, including, things like, all those terminal, all those data link, all those systems are supposed to be really good, even compared to the state of the art, even to the Israeli system. So there are some good signs. So what the DRDO is now saying is that definitely in the first quarter, but I personally feel, Shiv, it's nice to report on all these things, but the bigger picture here is that, I think we need to definitely get the industry into the forum.
I'm going to come to that. Anant, I'm going to come to that. That's part 3 of my discussion. Why is it, in your view, that India has got it wrong as far as drones are concerned? Like you said, we've built fighter aircraft, we've built helicopters, we've built warships. What is it about the drone program that it simply hasn't delivered so far?
Well, honestly, if you ask me, I think it boils down to two things. One is what Anant alluded to initially, was that we're not leveraging every arm of our industrial power. Why is it only DRDO and within DRDO only ADE has been charged with the development of UAVs? Why, for example, is ADA with their vast experience of 40 plus years not part of it? Why is HAL not part of it? Why are emerging private sector companies, why are legacy private sector companies not part of it? So one is we're kind of fighting this battle with one hand tied behind our back from the beginning, and the other is, I think, with UAVs specifically being a relatively niche technology and a relatively young technology in the defense world, we haven't really had the chance with UAVs to crawl, walk, run the way we did with, say, fighter aircraft, licensed production, domestic development, warships, armored vehicles, A vehicles, B vehicles. We've had the benefit of slowly and iteratively developing an industrial base for those specific platforms, which we haven't necessarily had for drones. Even though the Indian military has been operating drones, loitering munitions and drones since the late 90s, we didn't really look at production and induction at scale for a long time. So we kind of missed the bus there on collaboration, and now trying to go it alone, it's throwing up these sorts of problems as we're seeing with Tapas.
Okay, so it's a multi-layered problem, and India has been late to the game. It's struggling now to catch up. One of its biggest programs has been, literally foreclosed as far as seeing military operations is concerned. Anant, a point that you mentioned when I interrupted you was about opening this up to the private sector. We've just seen the big C295, manufacturing enterprise by the Tapas as one of the perhaps the first time that an Indian private sector company is doing any, real airframing in the country, building an entire aircraft in country. Could that happen with drones? We do know, recently there was an order placed with Elbit and Adani. They're going to be supplying a few drones that are going to be built in Telangana to the military. You've been in touch with all of these laboratories. We've seen siloization. We've seen, interlab rivalries. We've seen disparate labs kind of doing the same thing, reinventing the wheel, wasting resources, making drones which are similar to each other, none of which will ever have a chance to see the light of day. Bharat Earth Movers Limited, National Aerospace Laboratory, all of them have their little, wasteful little drone programs because none of them actually mean anything. Is privatization, in your view, the key, or at least the participation of the private sector, Anant?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely key question, taking into the Atmanirbharta into the focus. See, the issue with Tapas, and again, I want to just in a couple of points which I missed was, in Tapas, what happened was they tried to do too many things, and the configuration wasn't great, as Angad pointed out, in terms of the weight and other stuff. And, no UAV will be tasked to do so many duties in terms of the systems they put on that. It was, it was kind of a crazy thing. When you compare to other UAVs, whether it's the Chinese or the Israeli. So there was a flaw. Now, coming back to the advantage of driving industry. See, in India, in the private sector, we have the technology available. There are so many private sector companies coming out with great drones, isn't it? The issue here is that, we quite in the media, we don't talk much about the hidden roles, perhaps hindering the Desi programs, whether it is the Babudam, whether it is the finance ministry, whether it is the... Sometimes, people say unrealistic, PSQR, all those things. But what I would tell you is that, now, okay, there are issues. Why don't you come on the table, including Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Finance, HAL, DRDO, private sector, everybody come and bring out a realistic kind of PSQR. Definitely, you must include the private sector. We only hearing about hand-holding in seminars. We only heard about in speeches. Kitna suna hai, bolo? In ground reality, speeches versus policies is equal to, it is not ground reality, and we all know. So the issue here now is that take the case of ADE, where it was the Nishant program that was closed, whether it was uske baad, then the PSK was changed, then they got in this wheeled one called Panchi, wo close ho gaya, uske baad, then Rustam 2. So, it's not a very, very inspiring sight. And also...
Anant, you're absolutely right. I think what you and Angad have both given us on episode 2 of Battlecry season 4 is that a reality check is required. There obviously needs to be a wake-up call. Unfortunately, we don't know if industry, or certainly the government, is cognizant that something needs to be done urgently, because if you've got a project that's on mission mode, something that's needed operationally as quickly as possible, the doors are closed on it in this manner. Where are you going to go? Are we again going to be depending on imports? What are the promises and timelines on the Archer NG or whatever else is going to come next? Because these are not luxury items. Drones are no longer an additional luxury item that the Army, Air Force and Navy can use. It is absolutely essential, and every aspect of modern warfare is testimony to that. Angad and Anant, always a pleasure. Very, very illuminated. Thank you very much for being with me on Battlecry today. I know we've called this episode of Battlecry India's big drone mess, but I must tell you that it's not all bad news. We are, after all, a professional country with professional military, and they do have backup plans, even when projects like the Tapas fail to proverbially take off and be accepted into military service. There are backup plans, there are active acquisition programs to give the forces the advanced drones they so desperately need. Take a look. On Battlecry this week, we've told you how India's most ambitious drone program has hit a major hurdle. But there's no question that India's military needs high-performance drones and needs them soon. Let's give you an overview of the current efforts to bolster numbers of advanced drones. The biggest active procurement is a multi-billion-dollar effort for 31 Sea Guardian and Sky Guardian drones from the United States. India has been scouting these Predator-derived unmanned air systems for over a decade now. And with prohibitive costs now offset by the urgency of the requirement, there could be some forward movement on the acquisition. The Indian Navy has been operating a pair of Sea Guardian drones for the last few years, so it already has a taste of the game-changing capabilities these drones bring to the table. They'll be burning a major hole in the Indian pocket, but India has decided it wants them. India recently also ordered 4 Israeli Hermes 900 long-endurance drones. These drones have most recently been seen keeping tabs on the Israeli military operations in Gaza. The Hermes 900 is a full-bodied, aircraft-sized unmanned air system capable of several mission types. But probably most significant, it will be built in India by a joint venture between the Israeli manufacturer Elbit and the Adani Group in Telangana. And finally, speaking of advanced drones, India is also steeped in testing a futuristic, stealthy, unmanned strike aircraft called Ghatak. Unlike the two programs mentioned before this, the Ghatak is a concept and is being designed as an unmanned bomber platform, though it could theoretically, in the future, also perform surveillance or other duties. A scaled-down prototype has been in flight for a few years now, enthusing an aviation complex that hasn't ever tried anything this cutting-edge before. But it still will be years before the Ghatak can be an operational platform. India has been late to the advanced drone bus, but as you can see, it's making a concerted effort to close the gap and make up for lost time. And with the private sector doing stellar, cutting-edge work, including the recent flight test of a potentially game-changing pseudo-satellite, the space could get very exciting very soon. But it will need stamina, commitment, and the strength to brutally optimize. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Battlecry. And as we end, as I always say, remember, India's true potential and true national security can only be realized when no weapon needs to be fired and no human needs to be sent into battle. Thanks for watching.